On today's episode of the Play It Brave podcast, I'm doing a very special super full moon episode where we dive in deep about all things divine feminine, full moon energy, and how we can disappoint our parents so that we can live our best lives. Yes, you might not know that that was the direction this is going to take, but I brought on my very special friend and guest, Stacey Foley, who is a leading keynote speaker. She's an educator for creatives. She is a self-worth expert, and she is the host of her own podcast called Living Courageously. She has had the pleasure of taking the stage in multiple workshops and conferences around the world, and she truly is one of the people that I know is most, I guess I would say most assured of her mission, which is empowering women and helping them know their worth and their callings. So let's dive into this episode with my friend, Stacey.
You're listening to the Play It Brave podcast. Join Darcy for a wild rummage around in her wit and wisdom. She's a photographer, an educator, and a marketing ninja. Each week, she's going to be teaching you all about creating a life full of mindset, money, and marketing miracles. Listen to real-world experiences and surefire strategies from expert guests, all to keep you focused on your path to success. Think less hand-holding or fist bumps. So stop playing safe. It's time to start playing it brave. Here's your host, Darcy Benincosa.
Welcome to the Play It Brave podcast. Stacey, it is so good to have you on the podcast. Thanks for doing it on such short notice, too. You're appreciate welcome. You. Last night, I texted Stacey and I said, oh my gosh, I just found out the craziest thing because I was wondering, why is Easter on such radically different days all the time, like April 9th versus March 24th versus April 17th? And I realized it was because Easter always follows a very specific full moon. I had no idea that even in the past, people were governing different things by the phases of the moon. Now, Stacey, I know you know what that full moon is called.
Yes. So the full moon in March is called the Passional Moon, or in April, is the Passional Moon. And then Easter falls on the first Sunday after the full moon in April.
Okay. Do you know why they did that? Not that you would. I don't think I read enough about why they did that, but just that the moon was a very important factor.
Yeah, so it actually has a lot to do with the fact that Easter is the one holiday that's considered movable. Mm. And so it's just the way that it fell in the Passover, which has to do with Christ and the Bible. There's actually a relation to it. So it's why it's called the Passional Moon. And so it falls after the Sunday after the full moon. It's just the way that the cycles work with the moon and the way that it was decided by ancestry thousands of years ago that the Easter would fall after the Passional Moon. And it's actually how Passover got its name.
Yeah, that's exactly right. How Passover got its name. And I am not religious anymore, but I still love the idea of Easter. I love the idea of a resurrection, a rebirth, the bringing in of spring. And I love that, I think the moon used to play in people's lives a much more profound role than it has for us. I think a lot of people don't really identify with the phases of the moon or how that affects our planet or our water. The moon has such a deep effect on our oceans, the way water flows in and out from the tide, like all of these things. When did you first love the moon? So I love that I'm asking this question.
I think, for me, the moon has always been something that was a part of my life. My mom's always been very much into the moon. So I was introduced to it when I was younger, but I also grew up in a very traditional Catholic home. So it wasn't something that we ever really practiced a lot of. And then in my 20s, I lived in the mountains. And there's something so profound about being that close to the sky. You feel like you literally can touch the moon when you're out there. And I remember feeling sort of the power of her then, but it actually wasn't until this past year when I got sober and started to do a lot of deep transformational work in myself and figuring out what that meant for me and how to honor who I was, that I started to sort of re-practice and re-get into meditating with the moon and watching how it cycles around my own cycle and how it controls my moods and the people around me. And then it just became something that now I live by. And I think that it has such a profound effect on the world, and people don't even really see how much of an effect she has, especially when you look at people's full moons around the full moon. It's crazy how much people actually can change for those couple of days beforehand.
Oh, totally. I have been feeling it like crazy today. I think when I first started to see the moon as anything other than a beautiful, thing to look up at the night sky was when I really started to dive into my own feminine energy and what that really meant. Being raised in a very patriarchal religion and a patriarchal society, I think we can lose a lot of ourselves as women or even our cycles. So I have been as I've come into my own, and I haven't been afraid to talk about periods or menstruation or all of those things. Like, you get super embarrassed when you're younger and you pretend it doesn't exist and you try to hide it from everyone and you're completely embarrassed. And I realized, the moon has 4 phases. The period has 4 phases. The earth has 4 seasons. All of these very feminine things that truly to me represent the cycle of life. The moon is just as important as the sun, in governing so much of the energy of the earth. The earth is such a feminine being of life, and our periods are such a phase too. So I've always found it very beautiful with my cycles as a woman, because I think cycles are really important. I think we all have cycles and phases in life. I have found a lot of meaning in marking that with full moon, new moon, doing ceremonies, standing and grounding myself in the earth. What are some of your practices with the moon that you've done?
So I'm definitely more of a full moon girl than new moon, which is kind of funny because they do have very different significances. The full moon is the perfect time where we manifest, where we bring into our lives what it is that we've been dreaming about, where the new moon is our time to release and to let go of the things that are no longer serving a purpose in our lives. I've tried to be more conscious of new moon practicing, but I'm definitely somebody who gravitates towards standing under all of her glory when it's full. So I am definitely a full moon practicer, but I wear a lot of gemstones. I think that they all sort of give us a different ability to hone in on our own superpowers. So I am somebody who cleanses them the day before. You're supposed to do it 24 hours prior. I set them out on the earth. Even here in Canada, where we're still covered in snow, I always find a rock. I set them out on the earth the night of the full moon. I do sage myself, and I sage the space that I'm meditating in. And then I'll always do a full moon meditation. I often do guided. I just prefer it that way because for me, it's just easier for my brain to focus on where I want it to go, because I do specifically meditate on abundance and manifesting on the full moon. And I do a lot of journaling. I'll often write down journal prompts before I even start, so that this way, when I'm doing my meditating, the answers sort of start to play out in my mind already before they even come to me. And then I do oracle card pulls. So I'll usually do like a full moon spread. Each full moon has a different questioning that you're supposed to ask. So I will usually find sort of the questions that are significant to the moon and ask the questions of the universe. I'm somebody who's always been a very big universal energy person. I have a Buddha tattooed on my arm. I probably have 100 of them in my home. So I am definitely a universe powerhouse. So I like to hone in on that energy on the full moon. To me, it is the most powerful time for us to really focus inwards and to get a lot of clarity that sometimes there's too much noise in an everyday life. Especially right now, everything is so chaotic that I think people need to really find the time to silence their insides. And the moon is a really powerful time to be able to do that. And then I will always stand outside. So I look forward to the summer full moons coming when it's warmer. But even throughout the coldest winter months, I'm out there in my jacket with my toque and my mitts on, and I am out there standing underneath the power of the moon. There's something that's so cleansing about it. I've had some really good cries underneath the moon, and I've had some really powerful breakthroughs underneath the moon. I feel like when I have those big questions in life about the big steps that I'm supposed to take, there's something about finding clarity on that night that you just can't really find any other time. And I think it's because she is a luminary and she's somebody who shines that light down on the world to give you that sort of clarity. So I definitely find that I save up some of my big questions for full moon nights.
I love that. So this full moon in particular is supposed to be a really, really big one. I was reading up on it, and it seems like one of the biggest things is it's calling for just a soul expansion, like complete expansion of our souls, which I love because so many of us are feeling so confined right now, and our physical space might be super confined, and we might feel like we're going stir crazy. You all better be staying inside. And so I think the idea of finding that soul expansion, realizing that our souls are limitless, realizing that through our imagination, through our visualizations, we can take our lives in any direction that we want. Have you found anything else about this particular full moon that is extra special?
So right now, there's also, with the full moon this month, there is an asteroid that comes into play. And of course, the name of it, I can't remember right now, but there's an asteroid that comes into play with this full moon, and it's actually calling for people to heal. So it's kind of ironic that it's falling at this time right now. But this asteroid's presence is calling people to heal, to focus on themselves, and to be able to really start doing that deep transform work that I think so many of us have avoided. And right now, in this time where we are inside and we are self-quarantining and we are in this space of getting that opportunity to have no distraction, I think it's the perfect time for us to be able to start looking inwards and figuring out what it is that we need to heal from, where that sits in our lives and how much that holds us back. But this moon has this extra power of an asteroid, and it's calling on everybody to do that soul work this month.
Yeah. The other thing I read was that it's really going to be about third eye activation, which to me means tapping into your intuition.
Yep.
And I think that the way we've been running our businesses, the way our relationships play out, the way we've been treating our bodies, the way our schedules are, so many are being turned upside down. So many, I have so much empathy for all you moms out there who are now suddenly homeschooling all of your children, and you're trying to build a business and all of these things. And I think your intuition is going to be key in navigating everything that's to come for the rest of this year. I was talking to a friend earlier, and I was the same, who said, I had my entire marketing plan planned out for the entire year, and I was so on top of it. And now it's all just come to a screeching halt. What do I do with this screeching halt? And I've seen so many people close to me, a lot of people that I coach, have to work through anger, that we've been building something for months and months, and then all of a sudden it feels like it's reaching a halt. Dealing with, defeat, grief. I know for me, like I had last week where I just could not get on a schedule. So I was watching way too much TV. I was eating so many muffins every day. I don't even want to know how much weight I gained. I was just like all the carbs, like it was just my way of trying to comfort myself, which is a very default way that I go for comfort, especially being alone. Like I can't decide what's worse, being completely alone or being with 4 kids. I don't know. What's worse? Tell me. Who knows? But this is my reality.
Yeah.
Is all alone. And it just starts to feel very quiet after a while. I'm like, oh my gosh, my life is super quiet. So how have you developed your intuition over the years? Have you had moments in your life where your gut has just said a yes or a no about things and you listened or didn't? We should each try and share one where we didn't listen and one where we did. And I think, I don't know. Have you had any recent experiences?
So I think, for me, the biggest not listen happened for me many years ago. And I started a relationship with a man who almost took my life. And I knew in the first week of being in communication with him that it was a bad idea. And my gut just told me to not go that direction. But I was 21 years old. I had just lost 2 girlfriends in a car accident. I think I wasn't in tune with myself at that point. And maybe I was, I don't think I was as lost as I ended up when it was over, but I think that at the same time, I was still just feeling really lost. And I went against what my gut told me. And now I feel like, I look back on it and perhaps my life would have turned out completely different had I not taken that step. And then in the same breath, my life would have turned out completely different had I not taken that step. And I wouldn't get to be where I am now. So, but I definitely think that was one of those first awakening moments where I was like, damn, I should have listened to my intuition. A recent one on a yes intuition, actually, it's probably kind of funny, but I would say probably you. You were my recent yes intuition. I knew, I've been following your journey for so long. And every time that I thought about coaching with you, it was always a yes. It was just the right timing.
Yeah.
And I think it was waiting until I couldn't have coached at the level that I'm able to do with you had I not found sobriety first. So I think it was always just knowing when the timing was right. And then when I did finally reach out, there was just, my gut was like, do it now. Like, now is the time that you need to do this. So I think that's probably my most recent big yes. But intuition for me is something that's developed over the years. I don't think I listened to it when I was younger. I think getting out of an abusive relationship, becoming an addict, those are all things that kind of mute out your intuition because you're just not in the right mental space. And I truly believe that in order to be able to hear our intuition, to know where we need to be, and to be able to honor that purpose and that calling in life, we have to be able to be still. And when you are somebody who is struggling through abuse or addiction or triggers or trauma or whatever it might be, stillness is scary. And you don't like to sit in the stillness because it brings up a lot of stuff. And so it took a lot of personal healing and personal development to be able to finally start listening to my intuition again, because I'm finally in a place now where I can sit in the silence with myself and not hate what I hear. And that takes a lot of personal work to get there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So true. I found my journey, I grew up religious, Christian, Mormon, and so often when I would get like this hit, I would call it the Holy Ghost, or it was God guiding me. That was for most of my life. So then when I left religion at 30, I left later, I struggled with my intuition for a little bit because I thought, well, is this intuition? Is this God? Because God was a little different to me then. And, I still totally honor people who have the Holy Ghost and all of those things and anything like that. But for me, it was like I had to recognize my highest self and my divine and realize that was that there is source energy, but that it was going to come through in different ways. It was going to be very feminine. It was going to be attached to my inner knowing. It was going to be about setting boundaries for myself. It was going to be about being very clear about the life that I wanted to live because I think our intuition, oftentimes we know the life we want to live, and then something comes along and we think, oh, I know the life I want to live, but I'm too afraid, so I'm going to take this thing. I mean, even with coaching you, like what I love so much is you were very clear about what you wanted. And I remember asking you were like, I am a speaker, which you are. You've spoken all over the world. You've spoken at many conferences. You're often like the most popular one. I saw you at Hybrid Collective, and every time I saw you, you had a group of women around you that you were just nurturing and encouraging. And I said, do you want to make money first, or do you want to go down this route, which is going to be a slower way of making money? And you said, I know what I want, and I'm going to go down the route that's a little slower with making money. Not that you couldn't have, done something like I was thinking, one-to-one coaching or all of that, but you became very clear of a group program that was very closely tied to the moon. And I remember the day you Marco Polo'd me, that's the video chat app that she and I use all the time. And you're like, Darcy, I know what my calling is, and I know what I get to teach. And you came up with a cycle, I think it's 4 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. That you take women through that is so in alignment with the moon. Can you talk about how you got inspired for that? And because it's such a creative process, which I feel like the moon is like this feminine, divine energy that we can feel really creative. I know with full moons, you can feel so creative. You can birth new things. You're full of ideas. So yeah, share a little bit about that.
So I think for me, a big part of it was being willing to be who I am. So a lot of that came with guidance from you, and you were like, you're not in this yet. Like, this idea is here. The concept is great. but where are you? Where do you show up? And so after you'd asked me that question, it came down to me doing some real soul searching and being like, okay, what is it that makes me unique that I often don't talk about? Or what is it that I gravitate towards and that pulls me when I'm feeling lost? Because my goal with the course is to really help women who are feeling lost, for creatives who are feeling like they're stuck or they've lost their inspiration. And so I thought, well, when I feel lost, I'm somebody who gravitates towards the moon. And I even sat down with my husband and my kids, and I was like, when you think of what reflects out of my soul, what is it that you guys think of? And my daughter's like, tattoos. I was like, that's not what we're going for here. And so I instantly was like, but I'm tattooed with the moon and Buddhas, and I'm a very spiritual person in the sense of I believe that there's something greater out there. I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person. And I think that that's what sets me apart. And so I wanted to figure out a way to sort of incorporate all of that. And the moon has 4 phases, and the 4 phases all have a beautiful significance. And so I thought, okay, so what if we created this course to have 4 phases that as you go through them, you really start to find your clarity. You start to see yourself develop into who you're supposed to be and to own your calling. As I said, when you and I first started coaching, my purpose on this earth is to teach women their worth, to allow them to just unabashedly have that confidence about themselves where they don't feel the need to do what's expected of them in life, and they can just do whatever they want to. And that to me is the greatest thing that I could teach women in this entire lifetime of mine, is how to just honor what sits on your heart. And so for me, I thought, okay, well, I like that the moon has 4 phases. They're all developmental. They all have a purpose, and each one takes you a little closer to where you're getting. So the course was created with 4 phases. And then the title literally came from the power that the moon has, which is luminate. So to become a luminary is to become somebody that you can create influence over people and you can create change in people's lives. And so I loved the idea of luminate your life, because to me, it was the significance of bring the light back into your life, bring the light back into your darkness, bring it back into your soul, be able to really step into your power and own your calling and stop living for the expectations of other people. As creative women, we are the hardest on ourselves, and we fall into this trap of comparison and expectation and what we think we're supposed to do because somebody else is doing it. And not often do you meet a creative who truly stands in their own power, their own personality, their own aura, their own everything. And so that's what I was wanting to create with this, was an opportunity for creative women to truly step into their power and bring that light back into their lives and their careers and their passions. And so that was sort of the process behind how it developed. And then now all of the women who get to join my class, you have ninjas, I have luminaries.
I love it. Well, it reminds me, even if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, what the heck are they talking about? I think, when I told you that your idea was good, but it needed you in it. And that's what I found is so many people don't take the time to dive really deep into who they are to bring that out. And it's not easy. I mean, I think I told you that a couple of times. I was like, it's not there yet. You're like, really? Not yet? And I'm like, not yet. But then as soon as it got there and you told me the idea, I was like, that's it. It's there. And that's why if you're listening to this, I would encourage you, if it's warm enough tomorrow night, and if it's not, then do it in May, but to go out, lay on the grass somewhere, get a good view of the full moon, and contemplate your own worth. Contemplate your own value. Contemplate what makes you, you. What do you love? What are you so good at? What do people come to you for? What are you known for? Like, there's so many beautiful things that come when we sit and allow ourselves to truly see who we are. And I love that idea of luminate. I love that idea of being seen. I love that idea of connecting to our femininity. I think the one thing I love about moon energy is it is about flow. It's about the water within us. It's about cycles. It's not about just like go, 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 do, checklist. It's just so feminine, and it's so full of our own intuition. So I love that. And you, I think, opened the class and sold it out in just a couple of days, right?
I did. Yeah, I did. I put out a call to do some beta testing at a sort of discounted rate just to start the first batch.
Yeah.
I wanted to fill it with 5 women. I filled it with 5 and I gifted 1 to somebody who really changed my life at Hybrid. So she is also joining us. I felt that it was necessary. There was something about her soul that just spoke to me, and I had a really beautiful conversation and connection with her one day at lunch at Hybrid, and I wanted her to be there. I felt like she needed to be. So I gifted it to her, and I have 5 ladies that have joined us from I have 1 all the way out in London, England, and I've got 1 joining us from Hawaii, so from all over the world. So it's been a challenge with timing, but we have got it sorted. We start on Wednesday, my first group of luminaries, and I am so excited. I just feel like this is, it's one of those divine timing moments where when you trust in yourself enough and you have somebody who can guide you when you often feel lost, this is my chance to guide women through finding themselves, but you were my gift from the universe to guide me through finding what I was supposed to do. So I think it's one of those full circle moments that when you're able to have somebody in your life guide you, it gives you that opportunity to guide others. And these women are all creative women who are feeling like they've gotten lost somewhere along the way, that they feel like they've not maybe ever really honored what they wanted to do, but did what they felt that they were supposed to do. So this is my chance to let them step into their own power and see who they really are. And that to me is the greatest thing that I can do.
I love it. I agree that is the greatest thing that we all can do. We all have that space to hold for other women. There's a card in one of my Oracle decks, and it's called Mother, Sister, Daughter, Wife. And it really talks about these roles as women that we play. Now, we can be we're all daughters, so we all are at least one. But I think mother energy, sister energy, wife energy, daughter energy, I think it's all so many of the roles that we can play as a woman. We can play all of them. We can play, none of them. But I think that there's something really beautiful in holding space for each other as sisters. I think there's something really beautiful in that sisterhood bond. I think that women operate best as supporting each other, and not being in competition and not feeling like, oh my gosh, Stacey just created this class. I wanted to create a class to help women, but to realize that who needs to come into your circle and who comes into my circle, and all of those things are in flow, and that there is more than enough for all of us to step into our divine potential and our divine callings. And that's truly when we give up feeling lost. And what you're going to help those women do is to step into their divine potential, to connect with their highest selves, to connect with that version of who they are that is all things that they believe they were meant to be during this life on earth here. So for me, I am a big fan of rituals. I don't think we have enough of them today. I think a lot of them have gotten lost. I love that Easter was because, was tied so much to the full moon. And I love that we get to, at least for me, and it sounds like for you, that I take time every month to really set a new moon ceremony and a full moon ceremony. And it's just a way for me to check in with myself each month. I think that we can accomplish more in a month than we realize. And I don't mean this to do this and write this email and do this. I mean, we can do that too, especially if we pay attention to our most creative times. I definitely have a week in my cycle where I'm way more creative than I am at other times. And I try and use that. I'm in it right now. So I've just been going for the last 3 days. I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't been so creative in months, I know in 10 days, I'll be just taking naps every afternoon. But I just love that you're doing it within a month's time, and that there is something about accomplishing and finishing something in a month that doesn't need to go on month after month after month. And it's just this beautiful completed package ceremony to have those ahas and then move on to being more in your feminine and in your greatness.
Yeah. And I think for women, you talk a lot about the roles that we play in terms of being a mother and a wife and a sister. And I think that all of us at some point in our lives get lost in those titles, and we forget what it is that we want to be just solely as ourselves. And I think that's something that's so important to play on in this idea and this concept in this course, is to be able to teach women that those are simply titles, and those titles change all the time. You could be a wife, and the next year you may not have that title anymore. That title will always change, but who you are at your soul level is who you will always be. And when we can listen to that, when we can hone in on that, and we can quiet ourselves enough to find that divine talking to us, that's where our calling lives. So many people think that their calling is what their parents trained them to think it was supposed to be, or what their spouse tells them it should be, or an influence besides themselves. And we have to own our own callings, but we have to find that silence, and we have to silence that inner critic. And that's the hardest part. The first step of the course is release. It's releasing self-doubt and limiting beliefs, because when we can change the way that we talk to ourselves, we can change what we hear. And that has a really big impact on how far we can get. So, it's 4 weeks. It's really fun too, because we're starting Wednesday, which is the day after the full moon. So
it's perfect timing.
It is.
You're going to get the full cycle in. And I think, like you said, don't define yourself by those roles. I've been very rarely defined by those roles. What I've had to do is, because I haven't been a wife, a lot of times I judged a lot of women who were. I was like, oh, they got married too young. Oh, they married the wrong guy. Oh, like all these things to make myself feel better that I wasn't married, because for a long time in my 20s, I felt really bad about that. And in my 30s, I got a lot. People now, I don't think get it, the marital status isn't as big of a deal, but I'm in the wedding industry, so it's still kind of a big, And I really had to learn to expand myself to love people who had a title that I did not, to, have more empathy for my friends who had kids, instead of being like, see ya, I'm off to Paris because I got no babies, like I would do that because part of me felt really bad that I didn't have kids, and I think we all have, like you said, this comparison of, well, I'm not a wife. Well, I'm not a mother. Well, I am a mother. And there's always kind of somehow I have felt divided from mothers, or I have felt divided from wives, and I tend to have more single friends. But the last 2 years, I've really tried to break that down and not have my own judgment about it, and not feel unworthy that I wasn't wearing a diamond ring that some guy put on me and we made vows or whatever. So I think that's also like phases, right? Like there are such phases of life, and some of us don't do them like other people, and really, really allowing every woman to be in the phase that she is in without any expectations, without any of this complete ridiculousness that women who are married are more valuable, which, that's been taught forever though. Like it's really just the last few years that has not been taught, that a woman's worth is in her home, her children, so I was born in the 70s. So I grew up being a complete anomaly within my world. So I think that there's something really powerful in us allowing other women to have cycles and not judge them for those cycles.
Yeah. And I think the thing that we all have to remember as women is that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what title lays on you. We are all on the same team. We're all women. Exactly. And it doesn't matter if you are a wife or a mother or a daughter or a sister or an ex-wife, or if you've lost children, it doesn't matter, because we are all just women. We are all of the same divine feminine energy. We are all of the same compassion and empathy and love if we allow ourselves to be. We can all sit at one table. It doesn't matter what title lays on you. You are just simply a woman. And the titles are irrelevant, because the titles don't dictate your soul and what lives within there. And that is the most important thing for women to tune into, is to who they are as themselves, not as a title or as an expectation. I also grew up with I'm an 80s baby, an early 80s baby, but I grew up with two parents who both very much had an old school farm upbringing where wives took care of husbands and babies and husbands worked. And when I first started stepping out on my own, I had some very heated conversations with my own dad, who had strong opinions on the fact that I should be at home all the time raising babies and not standing on stages. And it's not who I am. And it took me a long time to realize that in order to be the best woman that I could be, and in order to be the best mother that I could be, I had to stop being an obedient daughter. Mm-hmm. And I had to realize that for me, I do belong in two places. I belong here with my family, and I belong on stage impacting women. And when I could step into that power of my own and honor that and say, no, it doesn't matter what your opinion is or what your expectation is. Your expectation of my life is not my problem. Because if I live my life for what you're expecting me to do, I'm going to lose the life that's meant for me. And when I could step into that power and I could own that, that's when I started to really notice a difference in who I was, how I presented myself, how I showed up on stage, how I showed up for women. And that is when everything really started to transform for me, was when I stepped into what I knew I was meant to do, not what the expectation or the title told me I should do.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I never stepped into my truest self until I was the most disobedient daughter in the world.
It's true.
And it's so powerful. It's brought me who I am. And, I want that for my nieces. I want them. And I guess, disobedience in whatever ways. I just didn't do the things my parents wanted me to do in terms of traditional marriage. And, they still aren't quite sure what I do for a living. They're like, what is this ring light you have? Why are you just sitting in front of your computer? How could you possibly make money doing that? But I love everything you just said. It's so true. To come to our fullest selves, our highest potential, oftentimes we have to disappoint other people.
Somebody else. Yep.
Usually our mothers.
Yep. Usually, or our fathers. And it's something that I pride myself in with my own daughters. I have two of them, and I have no doubt in my mind that they will never be anything besides what they're meant to be, because it's exactly what their mother teaches them. And I never want my girls to ever grow up thinking that they need to be something different than who they are because of what society or my husband and I expect of them. I expect nothing of them except for them to show up and just be vulnerable and honest and authentic, because that is the best thing that we can be. And yeah, sometimes in order to honor ourselves and what our intuition tells us and what our souls tell us, we have to let people down, and we have to just accept that we are more important than anybody's expectations of us.
And that we can also break that chain. My niece, I have a 13-year-old niece who was staying with me. We were quarantined together for a week. It was lovely. And the last night before she was going to go home, we were making dinner together. We were chopping things up. And she said, Aunt Darcy, can I tell you something? And she shared something so vulnerable that is obviously not my story to share here. And, it brought tears to her eyes. And I just looked at her and was like, that I want you to be anyone that you want, that like, I think you're incredible. Like, I just had to let her know again, I have no expectation of who they get to be. That's not true. I've had to work through it. Like my youngest niece, when she lived with me, I would dress her in all these cute little girly girl clothes and like have all these like pretty pictures of her in these white flowy dresses on beaches. And, since she has gotten older, she's like, no, I'm a tomboy. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And I have had to allow myself to release those expectations of having kind of a girly girl niece who wants to go do all these, flowy, I just want to pose her in all these things. And she really doesn't want to do it. And I'm like, Darcy, are you really going to force her to wear a floral dress when she just doesn't want to, just because you want a pretty shot for Easter? Truly, you've got to just allow them, and not allow, but love them to be who they decide they want to be. And we all of us women right now listening to this call get to allow the women, the young girls, nieces, daughters, friends, kids, to come into our lives and just love them unconditionally. And the same with our parents, our sisters, ourselves, most of all, because when we do it for ourselves, it's so easy to do it for everybody else. If I hadn't practiced all my self-love of allowing myself to not be Mormon Darcy or whatever, there's no way I would have had as easy of time with my niece when she, talks to me and I'm like, yeah, great. Don't be religious. Don't be this, do this, whatever you want, within reason. So
yeah, I always ask people, if you think about it from your own sense, who would you be if you hadn't felt the need to be what other people expected you to be?
I would have done everything a decade sooner.
Exactly.
For a whole decade, I just tried to be what I thought a good Mormon girl was supposed to be.
Exactly. And for years, my daughter's just about 10. And for 10 years, I was who I thought a mom was supposed to be. I lived my life thinking that I was doing what moms do, which is stay home and raise babies and bake, which if anybody knows me knows I can't actually bake at all. And I tried to step into all of these roles that a mom is. And then when I finally was able to sit down with my husband one day and said, look, I love you guys. And it's not that I don't want to be here with you, but it is that I don't want to be here with you all of the time, because my other calling is calling me to be in other places with other women. And, at the end of the day, he's the only person that needed to accept it. And it wasn't a matter of if he didn't accept it, I wouldn't do it. It was a matter of if he didn't accept it, I wouldn't stay, because I knew in my heart strong enough that this is exactly what I was supposed to do. And so for me, it was having that conversation with him. Everybody else's expectations of me, it doesn't matter, because this is what I'm supposed to do. And so I always ask women, if people hadn't placed their expectations on you, who would you have become? And I think so many women would say, I don't know if I would have had kids. I don't know if I would have gotten married so young. I don't know if I would have become a doctor if my dad hadn't been a doctor. We live our lives for expectations, and we have to start understanding that our lives are our lives. And that's it. It doesn't matter what anybody else expects of you. It is what do you expect of yourself. And, that's one of the most powerful things I think we can ask ourselves is, if we did not live our lives for what other people expected, what would we do? Because I think that answer is your calling. That answer tells you what you're meant to be doing, because it's what you really want to be doing.
Yeah. Did you all hear that? So I want you to go under the new moon tonight and look up at it and decide who you're supposed to be. On the opposite end of that, I'll just share a little final story. My sister, who has been a kick-ass hard worker her whole life, all my siblings, we have just got the work ethic in us. We are all very hard workers. And she's just been feeling really burned out. Her period is all messed up. Oh, sorry, April, TMI. No, she'll share this with anybody. I'm getting on talking about April's period. She's going to be like, crazy boundaries. And, with Corona hitting, she has closed down her salon for 2 weeks. And in this time, she's realized, I want some dedicated time off. And she's talked with her husband about it. And he's like, babe, I make enough money to pay our bills. If this is what you truly need to just be at home and bake and relax and take some showers and read and not push and burn out your adrenals and burn out that, that sometimes there is a time where your biggest calling might be out to go and become a kick-ass entrepreneur. And it might be to take a month and be home. And she's in a place where she can do that. I am not. I don't have a sweet husband who's going to pay my mortgage. So mine doesn't get to look like that. But hers can look like that. And she's had to work through some kind of weird feminist guilt for wanting that, because she always does want the big prize. She was named one of the top business women, 40 under 40. Like, she has had many accolades and honors defined by her work. And now all she wants is for a few weeks, probably a few months. She's like, these last 2 weeks, I just want to take 5 more months off, And it was like, well, you have the gift that you might be able to do that. And you don't need to explain yourself to anyone if you decide to take a couple months off, and that you have the means, So I think it goes both ways. Who can we allow ourselves to be right now? The Darcy I was at 20 versus 30 versus 40 are all different. They want different things. They approach life differently. But ultimately, the most powerful thing is knowing our worth, being in touch with our intuition, and having a clarity for who we do want to become. And that's what you really are helping women do. I love so much about what you do. That's
my goal.
I love it. You're doing it with you. You're doing it with your daughters. You're doing it with all the people that you affect. If you guys don't follow Stacey on Instagram, we're going to post everything, but her words are so comforting. I love it. You hardly post any photos. You post mostly your written word, and they're so powerful. Every time I see them, I'm like, oh, she's so wise. I love her.
I think the same thing when you post too. I don't post images of myself because I think for me, if there are people in the world whose talent is to create beautiful imagery, there's people like yourself whose calling in this life is to share their gift of photography. That's not my gift. My gift is a gift of words. And so I try to give to the Instagram world what I feel my gift in life is. And that's being able to write and speak. And, that's where my power lies. So plus really, when I post pictures of my face, like nobody likes them. Honestly, people are like, no, Stacey, we don't want to see you. Like, where's the words at?
They're just used to. We train our audience. We really do train our audience by what we post.
Yep.
So you have definitely trained your audience to want your words, which I think is really, really powerful.
Yeah, it's where my power lies. And so it's what I do. But it's been an incredible transformation. And even just getting to spend the last few months transforming with you, it's been such a gift for me. I think what you do is so powerful. And oftentimes we don't have people in our lives tell that to us or to say those things to us, because I think sometimes we don't really realize the impact that we make in other people's lives. But so that you impact, I think, more than you could ever possibly imagine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate that. Well, this was pretty awesome. So we're just going to get naked, dance under the full moon, lay out all our crystals, burn some sage, do a little dance and song, tap our third eyes into the moon. I mean, come on, guys. This
bang some drums. Like, let's make it happen.
Normal day in my life.
Me too. This is why it's not strange at all for me either.
No, I love the moon. I talk to her and I feel her energy, and I love tapping into, I just love tapping into nature, into things bigger than just my own self, to find guidance and inspiration and peace. And I think the moon is one of those really powerful things. So happy full moon, everyone. Set intentions, create, manifest, birth, clear. So excited. Stacey, where can we find all of your information?
So you can find me on Instagram at the Stacey Foley, and everything else is pretty much the same. So website is www.thestaceyfoley.com, and you can reach me via email on there.
And Stacey has an E and Foley has an E.
They do.
E-Y. That's how I always remember it. Thank you so much for being my guest today on the Play It Brave podcast. It was an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
It was my honor. Thanks, Stars.
You've been listening to the Play It Brave podcast. Love what you heard? Wonderful. You can shout about it in the reviews. I bet you know someone who needs a shot of self-belief. Then don't keep us a secret. If you've missed something crucial, we've got show notes for this and all past episodes over at darcybenincosa.com/Play It Brave. Thanks for tuning in, but don't forget, the world teaches you to play it safe. Stand up, stand out, and start playing it brave.